radios. Be mindful that as you transit to the pit lane, your pit box is parallel with the pit wall. Parallel to the pit wall in your pit box. Everyone, make sure we are parallel to the pit wall. Parallel to the pit wall. gonna start. Flag cars here.
Well, the cup is neither half full nor half empty. In fact, we are full of GT3 Cup cars out on track. It is the first qualifying session of the season here at Sebring Raceway for the Porsche Sprint Challenge North America GT3 Cup Series. I'm Joe Peak here with Roush Racing driver Joey Atterbury to join me up in the booth. And we've already seen the Caymans, so we've gotten a taste of action out on the track today, Joey, but now we unleash the big cars.
Yeah, these are those GT3 Cup cars, the 911 chassis cars, the 992 spec cars. Can't wait to see what these cars can do around this Sebring International Raceway circuit. Like you said, we had those Cayman GT4s out a little while ago, and a nice little lunch break, and now back to the second qualifying session here this afternoon.
Can already see drivers trying to warm up the tires, prepare. We haven't had any laps yet, but they've got 25 minutes to compete out here today to set their fastest time. They will take their two fastest times over the course of this session, and that will set the grid for the first and the second race this weekend. Now, if we do have any red flags, if anybody causes a stoppage of the session, that driver that caused the red flag will have those two laps deleted. So you do have to try and keep it clean here today. But so far, we ran clean in the Cayman GT4s. We're hopeful here today, and already we've got cars flashing past us on the front straight. We're watching Mike Mim, who is just preparing. Looks like he's coming out of the hairpin right now. He's got lots of clear track in front of him.
I like this strategy, you know, let everybody who's anxious to get out there go run out and sprint, and if you got a nice clear racetrack in front of you, guess what? You can focus on hitting your marks, hitting exactly where you need to brake, and hitting exactly where you need to start rolling on the throttle out here. And really excited to see these cars. In the Caymans, we had about maybe 10 laps. Maybe the most cars did the most of about 11 laps out there. These cars are just a little bit faster in terms of that overall pace, so I expect if you're going to stay out there the entire time, about 10 to 12 laps is what we'll see.
Most likely, and well, you're going to need all those laps because in the Caymans it was 21 that actually made it out onto the track itself. 39 cars are competing out here today. It is a massive field for the first round of the season, so it's going to be difficult to try and find the clear space like Mim has done, so definitely playing it very, very smart. When I look over to the left of me at the track map, everywhere else looks pretty darn full of vehicles. Here's Therese Lalu, though, who seems to be, well, she was on her first flyer, but she's braked a little bit and allowed someone through.
Yeah, I saw that coming out of the turn 7 hairpin. Did a nice job staying off of the racing line, letting the competitors get through that were on a fast lap. And that's part of the battle out here, is knowing when some of those cars are approaching in that rear view mirror and kind of staying out of the way if you are not on one of those fast laps. Always nice to be respectful out there. And here we go, nice and warming up the tires again.
Now on the left-hand side of your screen, on the tower, you'll want to pay attention to that because there are 2 classes that are competing. They're all in the same car, mind you. This is all the GT3 Cup car from Porsche. But there is the Masters class for those that are 50 years or older or who will turn 50 over the course of this year. And then the Pro-Ams are in the black cars that you see, the black numbers on the timing screen out there today. So I think we're getting our first times in. 2:05, the quickest right now. Alan Metney currently with the 2:05.1. And Darren Dean, the second quickest.
9.
I think these times are going to continue to roll in and also kind of close towards the front. That was a fantastic time from Metney on that opening lap. And that's something to be said, is that sometimes drivers, they take maybe a lap or 2 to get up to speed. But if you've got those brand new sticker tires on you, as long as you get that out lap done and those tires up to temperature, the pressure where they need to be based on where the team set them. So if you can go out there and use a brand new set of tires on that opening lap.
That was race control that we could hear there. Someone got a speeding penalty. I didn't catch quite which car it was. But that was an issue that we actually saw a lot in the Caymans as well. So there seemed to be some teething problems out there for a few drivers getting the pit speed limiter set to the right speed. Hopefully that'll be solved by the time we get to the race itself, although there will be no pit stops in the Sprint Challenge races. We do have the Endurance Challenge later on this weekend. That's going to be a lot of fun when we get to that, and that will involve some pit stops. This is Vitiello currently in the 248 that we see circulating around, and he's heading out through Bishop Corner down at his Jean Dambien. Very fast set of S's this part.
It's also extremely low grip here, especially through turn number 16. There's very minimal elevation change at Sebring, but turn number 16 apex seems to stick up maybe about a foot or so, and it always seems that when you roll onto the throttle coming out of that corner, just the car kind of falls off the end of the world out there and seems to really want to dance out, especially the back end. So controlling and managing those rear tires, always important in a race situation, but it's always important in qualifying too. You want that forward drive, that forward traction coming out of 16 down that long Ullman straight.
Frank is sitting third in class currently. Make that second now as he jumps up, 4th overall. Excellent lap for Vitiello, 2:05.819. And he's about, it looks like a 10th, little less than a 10th behind Darren Dean, who is currently our quickest. Scott Blinn picking up where he left off last season, currently third quickest, still in and amongst the front runners in that Masters class.
I really enjoy watching all of these onboard shots. It shows you how well that these Porsches can really attack this Sebring International Racetrack. We always talk about respect the bumps when you come to Sebring. It is incredibly uneven when it comes to the surface, and some of those apex curbs can definitely jump out and bite you, but these Porsche cars, these Porsche race cars seem to swallow up those bumps and ride over them nicely, and then it's up to the drivers to be able to really extract that speed.
So that's Tower Corner. And in fact, we just went by there with Mim.
209 has continued.
So 209 car, just trying to see if I can spot who that is currently, because they seem to have been able to take off without a problem. That's Laura Eli. She has recently switched over from the USA West Series, which we'll pick up in just a couple weeks' time over at Spring Mountain. Very wide here from Melito, just letting some cars go through.
I think that Tony saw that kind of gaggle of cars in the rear view mirror and decided to get out of the way, knew it wasn't on a fast lap, and Sure enough, down this back straightaway, doing a little bit of the same thing. You see cruising about 75 miles an hour, but he's constantly checking that left mirror and his center rear view mirror. What he's doing is he's looking to try to find that gap. Remember, this is qualifying, so you don't want a car directly in front of you, and you also don't want a car directly behind you, because that's kind of unnecessary pressure, unnecessary anxiety that is taking away from your focus that you need to do in your qualifying laps to hit everything at 10/10ths.
We've also got a spin at turn 16 from the 285. I think that, no, that's not Mim. I'm trying to remember who that was. Oh, Poole is the one who's had an off. Oh, and we've got our first red flag, unfortunately. So this will eat into the session. So the drivers will have to come in. If you're on a hot lap, well, it's unfortunately going to end right here. You can't just complete it and continue on. Now, you were talking a little bit earlier today, you know, you just mentioned how difficult that corner is, but you talked about the lack of grip as well with me and how tricky that one is.
So I think that Sebring in general can be a relatively low grip racetrack, depending on what corner you're talking about, right? But yeah, I think that turn 16 is probably one of the most difficult corners on this racetrack. There's sections of corners that feed into other areas that you really have to kind of be in front of, otherwise you're kind of be on the back foot. But turn number 16, it is so slippery, especially on the exit out there. And so as a driver, you want to roll onto the throttle as soon as possible right there, because it launches you down that very, very long back straightaway. But kind of what we tend to do is get on the throttle maybe a little bit too early, and you combine that with a very slippery corner, and you can easily lose control.
Ross Poole is not new to racing, but he is new to the Cup car. He's used to being in the Cayman. And we were talking to Dan Ammon, who's one of the few that's running both this season. It did sound like, Joey, that there are some slight differences to adjust to.
There are some differences between that Cayman and these 992 chassis cars, and I think specifically just the performance levels. You know, they're both incredibly safe race cars. They're both incredibly easy to drive once you get into them. And remember, the gas pedal is still on the right, the brake pedal is still on the left, and you got a steering wheel in the middle, and it's just up to the drivers then at that point to kind of understand the different nuances between the cars. But I think that they are similar enough that we do have drivers that are in both the Cayman and also these 992 chassis cars. I think when you swap between them, you just kind of have to know, all right, these Cup cars are going to be a little bit faster down the straightaway. They're going to have a little bit better performance on the brakes. And then also remember, they've got a little bit more aerodynamics packed onto this car as well. So I just think the performance envelope just a little bit bigger with these ones.
So we just heard from Race Control about a minute left before they're going to be released. It sounds like the 285 was able to drive himself back to the lane. Now the downside is, regardless of if he could drive his car back, both of his fastest laps have been deleted. The Ross Poole going to be sent to the back of the field, essentially, for both races.
Standby, starter.
Starter being told to be at the ready here, as we're going to thankfully have a very short stop, because they do not stop the clock. That has been going this entire time, so this eats into every opportunity.
And if we think about strategy, well, it's qualifying. You just go out there and do as many fast laps as you can. But what happens if you're entering turn number 17 and that red flag comes out and you have to abort the lap? It can be extremely frustrating, and then you got to come down pit road after you do that slow yellow flag lap. And to your point, the clock never stops. So you could have potentially been on your fastest lap, but then the red flag comes out and it all goes away.
Yeah. So now the car's already gone through a heat cycle, and you're going to have to get back out there and get it in as best condition as you can. There's not enough time for the drivers to get over and change those tires. In fact, I don't think they are allowed to, as they only have so many sets for the weekend. Green flag just being shown. And while we are sitting stationary here in the pit lane with Melito, that's because there is a line of cars. And much like in traffic, you just have to wait for eventually the snake to start moving forward at the front.
Crucially, though, it was cleaned up in a very quick fashion, and look at this. We already have the cars going back out there on track. Like you said, green flag already out. So, yeah, it can be a little bit disruptive, that red flag, in terms of getting your laps in, but a great job by the track crew and getting everything cleaned up, and these drivers back out there to be able to put down that qualifying lap time.
Red flag during qualifying for 285.
And there again, we heard the instructions about deleting those 2 fastest laps. Now, one thing I should clarify is, since that's the 2 fastest laps, if he had more than those 2 fastest laps, he might still have something on the board. But I don't know what kind of laps, what number of laps he may have run. Meanwhile, up at the top, it is Kleck that is leading this. Cole Kleck. I know it says E next to his name. It's Edgar is his official name, but he kind of goes by Cole for most people. Meanwhile, we've got Williams leading down in the Masters category. So David Williams in the 237 with a 205.7 beneath him right now. And that's another one, boy, that's going to be tight, because that looks to be about 0.03 of a second between himself and Darren Dean for the front row in that class.
It was pretty incredible to see how close the times were earlier in the day with those Cayman GT4 classes. And you're right, yeah. Only about 0.04 of a second, 300. Oh, my goodness, you're right. Another handful of drivers here that are probably only separated by, what, 1/4 of a second, separating about 4th through 8th place right now. So you're right, incredibly stacked on top of each other for performance.
So that was Willingham and Treffert that we heard over race control that were being given black flag for emerging from the pit lane too soon. So they were a little bit hot on the button, unfortunately, and that'll eat up their time even more. I mean, we restarted with about 12 minutes to go. It's already less than 10 minutes left. It takes so long to get around this track. That has got to be agonizing.
And we think with the red flag, okay, well, it takes 1 lap away. No, it doesn't. It actually takes potentially 2 laps away, because you've got that in lap, and then you have to get back out there on the racetrack, go all the way around again, reach start finish, and then start a new flying lap. So really the red flag, you give up a lap, but you give up about 4, maybe even 5+ minutes of track time out there. And that can be crucial when you're trying to do 2 solid qualifying laps.
14 Masters cars and 14 Pro-Am cars rather, and 25 Masters cars out there. LaLuke heading down through the hairpin and then launching off, trying to speed up. She was definitely waving people by along the Ullman Straight to get herself a little bit of room, and it does look like she's got it pretty well here. Let's see how she handles them through Cunningham and Collier.
Can be a difficult brake zone there. And looks like you got the 234 car around in turn number 7. That is down at the hairpin area of the racetrack, and it looks like he's actually out on the access road. So you were calling it, what, the paper clip? The safety clip down there.
The safety pin, yeah.
The safety pin, and he's off on that safety road.
And it doesn't look like it's hit anything. It was facing... It seemed to have... definitely had a big issue, but it was McCaig and the 234 that had that problem. So Sean going to get it back going once again. Reinhold Kron out here, and one of the drivers that is coming in from the USA West Series as well, we should mention, and trying to drive over here in North America. A lot more drivers tend to compete here in the North America Series, so many will kind of make the leap over to see how they stack up against a bigger pool of fish.
Pretty narrow there on that turn 5. Just all depends on the driver and their comfort level on how they want to get through that complex, and it feeds you down this bending straightaway to what is turn number 7. You'll see a lot of the drivers hang out in the middle of the road on approach because they're avoiding some of those bumps on the racing line. Then they get over to the brake zone, and really nice and tidy through turn number 7 in terms of the apex there.
Looking good. Woody Witchard, who we were watching there. But now we've got Tony Melito, and he's got another car very close in front of him. Doesn't really want to start the lap like this, I wouldn't think. It's not really a track where you can do much for the draft, but look at how close they get down to the apex on that first turn.
Whew, and Tony was kind of flirting with the track limits there on driver's right of turn 1 on the exit. It can be so bumpy out there, but you also want to commit to the throttle in turn number 1, and once you commit to it, you definitely don't want to lift off because it can cost you some lap time, and then you quickly approach that turn number 3 braking zone. And you're right, I think that Tony is maybe a little bit close, but every driver is a little different in how they kind of extract their speed. Some drivers actually like a little bit of a carrot dangling out in front of them, helps them along.
Yeah, he's currently 9th in class Tony is, with a 206.8 underneath him, and has actually a thousandth of a second to make up to get to Therese Lalu. Again, with this many cars, no wonder we've seen so much tight racing out there, so many close times amongst them. We continue to watch with Tony as he heads towards Tower Corner, another very difficult 90-degree right-hander. Both of them trying to figure out who that is in front of them right now. I think that's the 88.
I know that you were talking about how close he was to Lalu directly in front, but just looking even further up the board, so Melito was at a 206.8, and if he does a 206.6, which is what Gilliland is here in the 280 car that we're riding on board with, it's actually a handful of positions. That goes to show you how close, and call it 10 through 20th is out here.
Yeah, little mistakes will be costly. You need to be as on it as possible. Gillen's car is another one that tends to be something of a favorite with that sort of theme. We got a spinner. Can't see where this is, but the 213 off safety pin. Todd Perriott.
13 is fine.
And that actually looked well before turning over there, and there's actually another car down there at turn number 7, well off of the racetrack. So we've got two of these Cup cars do a stop under turn number 7 exit road out there. But I was going to make the comment that it almost looked like maybe a little bit of a lockup, or in these cars you can get a little bit aggressive on some of those downshifts, and there's bump all over this place. If you get a wrong and maybe an aggressive downshift, you can lose the back end.
Looks like that's under caution flag. Yeah, you can see drivers backing off. So this is not going to help those who are trying to get a hot lap in, and that car is definitely there as we see the view from Vitiello showing. He's finally getting an opening. Yep, and he's back out on track.
It's a nice job to wait patiently, right? It's always frustrating as a driver to shoot to a corner and there's a yellow flag. You never want to go charging in there. You all want to make sure that you're safe in the situation throughout the entire corner is safe. And the driver did a nice job to wait patiently for a gap and then rejoin the racetrack.
I was able to finally figure it out. That's a 234 Sean McCaig that's once again well off. And I wouldn't say he's out of the firing line because he's kind of stopped straight where you would run to if you just kind of outbraked yourself into that corner. But he is way off of the track itself, so I'm not sure if they're just kind of letting him sit there for the time being.
I did see that McCaig kind of had that car maybe backed up off of the access road a little bit, which is probably why race control says, you know, it's okay. It's well down through the brake zone, and if there's any situation down there, you should be able to avoid McCaig way off on that access road as we ride on board Mim here in the 255. It does sound like turn 7 is getting to be cleared up as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and he's still out there, so I'm guessing he just kind of moved it behind the barrier and moved himself out of the way. A bit of an unfortunate one for him. Kleck still our fastest overall over Metney by, am I seeing, is that 1.1 seconds?
I really couldn't believe how fast Metney went on the early part of the session, but you're right, Kleck has gone up there and just obliterated that lap time. So Metney P2 a 205.1, Kleck a 203.9.
This is a stark difference from the top of a Masters right now. As we said, that is less than a tenth of a second apart. But everybody in the top 5 overall have all come into pit lane with 2 minutes left. That means they're done, essentially. So Vitiello, the highest, who's still out on track, able to do something. Got Blend, maybe, who sits behind. And then, of course, Leathers in the 275. All of those Masters drivers, they maybe sneak up a spot or two at the end.
As we ride on board with Mim and here in this 255, or as long as maybe they can up just another tenth or so. It looks like we got the 202 car into the grass there, and I believe that might be turn number 7 as well. It seems to be a little bit of a danger spot here. It's Cup car qualifying.
Yeah, so we're seeing the 227 on our time screen, but that's clearly the 202 of Pratt. I don't know if that's just a transponder issue of some sort. But yeah, it looks like a Boy Vodka car unfortunately stranded a little bit. So with very little time left, this could heavily interrupt things. We're not getting any sort of red flag at the moment. There might just let that one sit. And we ride on board Todd Perriott in the 213, coming around, getting ready to start another lap, as sounds like our Good Boy Vodka car is back on its way.
And crucially, now is the time, right? If you're a driver or a car that has not been able to kind of put down what you want to in terms of qualifying, you got to get it done right now, because I'm looking at the clock, about 40 seconds remaining here in this 25-minute qualifying session. So all the drivers crossing the start-finish line right now, this will be their last attempt.
There's not that many cars comparatively that are still out there. Most have come into pit lane that I can see. So this might be somewhat limited compared to before. Now's the time that you want a nice clear track. Some of them not seeming to get it out there, as a few of them definitely dealing with some obstacles.
Can kind of trip over each other out there sometimes. You get a fast car on a fast lap that they're really going qualifying, and then if you get a couple slow cars that are off of the racing line, well, it's okay for maybe one car, but it can kind of cause problems, funnel effects later in some of these sectors. Trying to obstruct other laps out there. Everybody's trying to get their maximum performance window.
Treffert's going to be our first one to take the checkered flag. He does not improve, stays in 11th in class, 18th overall. Next one across the line going to be the 202. So as we wait for... No, actually, he's coming to pit lane, so he's abandoned that lap. Let's see if anybody else carries on. The 208 will try and finish it up. McKay gets out of the car, it looks like, as we get a shot of what's going on with him. No change of position, it looks like.
I think a lot of these cars have probably already finished their qualifying effort and are coming in off of their, call it cool-down lap. I had mentioned this earlier in the Cayman qualifying. You know, it can be sometimes difficult to figure out which cars are actually on their cool-down lap, because these teams, these managers want that performance in the car. They want the temperature, they want the pressures up and everything, so that way they can go out there and better prepare the car for the driver for those race sessions. So you'll usually see drivers kind of stick on it even on their cool-down laps.
We did have a few come across. Mim, Blend, neither improved. Looks like Tillman Schmid also stays put where he is. Todd Perriott not moving upwards. Tony Melito and Frank Vitiello still out there. Vitiello looks like he's coming to pit lane.
So once you release the
268 is still running. That's Dan Ammon. But he is coming in, so that's everyone done. And our grid is essentially set for the weekend. All right. A little bit of a different complexion from what we saw last time out in the Caymans. As you can see everybody just coming into their teams to get them looked over for inspection. Those that were into their stalls are going to try and join the line.
98.
I was extremely excited to see those Caymans out there on the racetrack earlier, and now after seeing these 992 cars get out there and do their qualifying effort, I mean, seeing this amount of cars on the racetrack, I think we had 36 cars take place in that qualifying effort and up to 39 that can be out there racing in these GT3 Cup cars. It is going to be a busy racetrack.
Very, very busy, that is for sure. So here's your top 10 real quick. We've got Cody Kleck on the pole position overall with Alan Metney in second. Then Tutino will be starting in third. Then our pole for the Masters is Williams. You've got Darren Dean starting second, but fifth overall. You've got Frank Vitiello in sixth, Scott Blend seventh, Sean Leathers eighth, Chris Hutter in ninth, and Tony Melito rounding out your top 10. When we next get to talk to you, it is going to be for racing, as the Caymans will be up next today here at Sebring on Flow Racing. Stick around for more Porsche Sprint Challenge.